Father God, thank you for today. Thank you for this place. Thank you for this particular day of the week that we have come together to kick the week off. And Father, to come in and perhaps lick some wounds from this last week to try and put things back in perspective. Lord, to be reminded that you are God and that you are in control and that there are priorities and issues that we need to have you help sort out in our lives. Lord, open our hearts. Help us to be ready to hear. Help us not only hear, but be willing to do what we know you want us to do. We thank you now in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're in a series, The Treasure Principle. It's kind of a test. What is the treasure principle? How do you state the treasure principle? You can't take it with you, but you can send it forward or send it ahead. And we have looked, the last couple of weeks, we've looked at several keys in that. We hope you'll kind of follow along with that. If you've missed any of them, they're on YouTube. You can catch up with that. I want to just share a quote. My devotion Friday held a quote by C.S. Lewis that really kind of fit in with what we're talking about. And he put it like this. C.S. Lewis said that through beauty, he experienced a yearning that compelled him to earnestly search for its source. As if he were feeling a ray of sunshine warm on his face, knowing there must be some sun from which it emanates. And he concluded his thought like this: a baby feels hunger. Well, there is a thing such as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, well, earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. That kind of leads us right into the fourth principle today that says, I thought I had it written down. Fourth key is live for the line, not for the dot. And that kind of that diagram top kind of explains it. Life on earth is the dot. Life that never ends is the line. And it depends on which one we're living for, the quality and character of life. Living in the treasure principle means I live on the line that stretches through eternity, not limited to the small dot that we're on here. And Paul kind of takes that and expands on it in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 for us, 16 through chapter 5, verse 10. And as I look through there, we're going to kind of read through it as we work through the message, but as I look through it, there are three contrasts between the lifestyle we live. Those who live for the dot live one way, and those who live for the line have something that contrasts completely. And so we're going to look at that. The first one we're going to see is discouraged or encouraged. If you look at chapter 4, verse 16, he says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. And for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." I have a question for you, and it's not there. There it is. I want to ask you a question. Which one of those characters characterizes you and your approach to life? Everybody knows those characters, right? Eeyore. How does Eeyore approach life? Woe is me. It's always something bad that's going to happen to him. How about Tigger? How many enjoy being around Tiggers? Yeah, they're good in short doses. Yeah. But I think those two really capture the essence of what Paul's talking about. He says, we do not lose heart because I'm focused on the bigger picture. Honestly, I think Paul was a Tigger. I think Paul understood the future, understood that there's nothing in this life that really needs to get me down because I know what's coming. So we're going to back up. I got those out of order, but I want to back up just a little bit and talk about more. Let's recognize the fact first that we live in a world that can discourage you a bit. You know, it's easy. I quit watching the news a long time ago because the news is depressing. You know, it never seems like they have good news stories. They tell you all the wrong that's going on, and if you watch it long enough, you can be discouraged, you can be depressed, you can lose all hope. So would you agree that we live in a world that can discourage? That the life on the dot, if that's all there is, the life that we know right now on this earth, if that's all there is, how many would like to just check out? Because it's discouraging, it's depressing. But there are people who live in the midst of that, and I believe believers should be in the midst of that discouraging world, who still constantly have an optimistic outlook. And it depends on where we focus our attention. Paul uses two ideas here. He talks about the outward first. Those who focus on just the things that are outside them, looking at the world as it is. The outward decline. He uses the word wasting away. Everybody understand nothing in this world lasts? Everything we have declines. Everything we have breaks down. Everything we know eventually goes away. Look at the testimony we have around us. I have a picture here just to remind us. Well, maybe. There we go. I mean, if you look at these pictures, it's a testimony. We drive to McMinnville sometime and you will see or perhaps smell the decline. You look across the next page and drive by a wrecking yard. That beautiful new car you bought today will end up in that wrecking yard at some point in time. Look at the bottom left-hand picture. The mirror is a reminder that everything declines for most of us. And ultimately, the picture of a cemetery tells us everything wastes away. If that is our only focus, if we only focus on the outward, the things that are wasting away, how could we not be discouraged? I love the way Jeff Foxworthy put it. Let me share. He says, you might be a senior if, not in high school. You might be a senior if at the breakfast table you hear snap, crackle, pop, and you're not eating cereal. Your idea of a night out is sitting on the patio. Happy hour is a nap. It takes longer to rest than it did to get tired. You stop holding your stomach in no matter who comes into the room. You have more hair in your ears than on your head. Everything hurts, and what doesn't hurt doesn't work. You sink your teeth into a steak, and they stay there. We are declining. Our age, it's the nature of the world because of sin that we are getting worse and not better. Let's look at it a little more seriously. If you turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 12 with me, the writer of Ecclesiastes puts it like this. 12, 1 through 5. And I just kind of want to listen, see if this doesn't describe the effect of aging in our bodies. It says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you'll say, I find no pleasure in them. And he says, before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain. There is a tendency as we grow older to be prone to depression, to see things as negative, to see things as without hope and sadness. He goes on, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop, That's talking about your bones weakening. It's talking about losing muscle mass and your back getting weak. When the grinders cease because they are few. What are the grinders? Your teeth. You tend to lose those. They tend to wear down. Or those looking through the windows grow dim. Your eyesight begins to fade. When the doors to the street are closed and the sound of grinding fades, your hearing begins to, and I resemble that. Somebody at the conference last Saturday said, these hearing aids make me feel like I'm really shouting. So if I do that, I'm sorry. But men rise up at the sound of birds. That is, they wake up early. They can't sleep well. But all their songs grow faint. They can't hear them. When men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets, as you age, fears tend to creep in. Fear about falling, fear about finances, fear about a lot of things begin to dominate your life. When the almond tree blossoms, anybody having trouble with white hair or gray hair? And the grasshopper drags himself along and desire is no longer stirred. You find out as you get older, you lose interest in things. You just don't want to do things anymore. You just kind of want to sit. And then the man goes to his eternal home and mourners go about the streets. Death. So the writer of Ecclesiastes talks, if you took time just to focus on the physical decline of your body, it would get discouraging, wouldn't it? Aren't there moments you get up and look in the mirror and you just say, man, this is depressing? That's looking at the outward things. And it might even stint beyond our physical. I think the physical and our aging is maybe the most discouraging. But if we got our eyes focused on the decline of our society and the world around us, if that's all we looked at, if life on the dot was just it, how depressing and discouraging would that be? But then Paul in 2 Corinthians says, they're also focus on the inward renewal. The fact that this physical body is declining, the physical body will eventually die unless Jesus comes back first. But that's not the depressing part. The great part is that God is doing a work inside you. That you are better today, spiritually, and in relationship with God today than you were yesterday. That God is working in you, creating something amazing. God is working in you, making you more like Jesus every day and reviving you and renewing you. If you look at Colossians 3, 9 and 10, I want to just, if you turn over there very quickly, Colossians 3, 9 and 10, Paul puts it like this: do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and put on the new self. And here it is, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its Creator. Inside, my working with God, my cooperating with Him is creating something far better. And that is exciting. That's encouraging to see the progress being made. If you go over to Philippians chapter 1, he says, God will continue the work He started in you. You're looking ahead, you're seeing what I'm going to be, not what I am. And that's exciting. You know, if any of you have ever gone to a gym, you go in pretty out of shape, but you go in with a vision. You go in with the idea, if I work hard enough, if I do it well enough, I'm going to come out looking differently than when I came in. That's the spiritual realm. Focus on the inward. Focus on what God's doing in me, and there is encouragement in that. But he goes on to identify something else in this passage that can discourage us, and that is troubles. I love the way Paul puts it. Most of us wouldn't describe it this way. Verse 17, for our light and momentary troubles. Let's just say the troubles of life can be discouraging or encouraging. Paul says light and momentary. How many of you would describe your troubles as light and momentary? Now, you want some perspective, go back and read 1 Corinthians 11 and see what Paul describes as light and momentary. He talks about being flogged. He talks about being shipwrecked. He talks about being beaten by rods. He talks about being left for dead. He talks about going hungry. He talks about going without sleep. All those things because of his... And Paul looked back and said, those are light and momentary. Why would he say that? Because he's looking ahead. He's not focusing on the moment. He's focusing on what lies ahead of him. In Job 5, 6, and 7, Job says, troubles are a part of life. Doesn't come from the ground, it just, you just are destined for troubles in this life. Jesus said it in John 16. In this world you will have trouble. And if we just focus on the trouble, that gets discouraging. But Paul says we focus on light and momentary troubles because they are what? Because they are achieving for us an eternal glory that outweighs them all. Paul talked about that in Romans chapter 8. He said, I do not consider these sufferings worth comparing to the glory that will be in us. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, we have the story of Jesus. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, who for the glory set before him. You think he was looking on the line? Endured the cross. It's that if we look beyond, every trouble you have is an instrument in God's hand to accomplish something in your life. You could look at James chapter 1, where he says, consider it pure joy when you encounter troubles of many kinds. When's the last time you celebrated when troubles came into your life? Why does he say you can celebrate? Because they are developing in us perseverance. They're developing in us patience. They are refining our character and making us more like Jesus and more dependent upon God. So, living on the dot or for the line, living for this earthly existence for the line, look at your life. Are you more discouraged than you are encouraged? Are you living with more courage or less? Now, do not hear me say a Christian shouldn't be discouraged, because history's full of the stories of discouragement. You look at Moses, the great leader that took Israel from Egypt out in the middle of the wilderness. Moses got discouraged. You look at Elijah, the great prophet. He did a great miracle. God did a great miracle for him on Carmel, and what is the next thing you find Elijah doing? Running for his life, finding himself in the wilderness, finding himself alone in the desert, and his words are these, God, kill me. I might as well be dead, because people are pursuing me and want me dead. David got discouraged. Even Paul got discouraged. If you read the book of Acts, the very last chapter of the book of Acts, Paul is on his way to Rome, and it says he reached 3 taverns in Italy, the city of 3 taverns in Italy, and it says believers met him, and I was encouraged. So don't hear me saying that discouragement's never a part of the believer's life. I went through that. Those of you who are here know that I hit that wall in September. But as a general tone of your life, do you spend your life discouraged or encouraged? Do you see optimism? Do you see pessimism? Now and it's my favorite line when Dolores says you're being pessimistic, I said, well, I'm being realistic. She doesn't buy it. So, she'd tell you, I tend to be an Eeyore type of personality. So discouragement or encouragement, those are the signs of whether we're living for the life on the dot or on the line. Then he goes on to say, going back to our text, so we fix our eyes on what is not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Now we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. For For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. Now it is God who made us for this very purpose, and has given us the Spirit as a deposit guaranteeing what is to come. Therefore we are always confident and know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. Verse 7, we live by faith, not by sight. Living for the seen or unseen. And I was going to do this, and I forgot. I was going to have a little demonstration. I was going to have something to hold out and something in a bag, and ask which one you would choose. Well, my mom always said, better a bird in the hand than two in the bush. That means better go for what you see than what you don't see. How many of you, let's make a deal was always a great one. I mean, you had something and you could trade it for something behind the doors, and that didn't always work out well. You know, we can focus, when we live for the dot, all we focus on is what's seen. We focus on our vehicles, we focus on our homes, we focus on our personal relationships, we focus on our health, we focus on our bank accounts, we focus on our investments, we focus on all those things because they're tangible, because they can be touched, because they're there. Paul says, I don't look at those things. Why? Because they're going away. They're temporary. What is unseen is eternal. What is unseen is eternal. I like the term delayed gratification. We live in a society that's about instant gratification. I have grandsons that are about instant gratification. Anybody ever use the term when you were a kid, money burning a hole in your pocket? My grandsons, if they get money in their pocket, the first thing they want to do is spend it. And if you try to say, well, if you save that and collect some more, you can get something even better. No, I want it now. And how many of us know people that live on that plane? That we want what we want now. And we don't delay our gratification for what's to come. I love the definition. It says the ability to resist the temptation for immediate reward, to make way for later and more significant reward. You know, I can settle for a less expensive car and a used car and a broken down car, or I can keep saving my money and find a better car. It all depends on whether I'm willing to wait. That's what this is all about. The life on the dot is about wanting it now, finding my satisfaction here and now. Life on the line is saying, this doesn't matter. There's something better coming that I need to live for. And so Paul says, he uses the term, we live by faith rather than sight. If you go to Hebrews chapter 11, that's what it's all about. Hebrews 11 is all about men who saw something ahead. And I love the way Paul concluded that chapter. He says, these were all commended for their faith, all those people he talked about. But here's the part, underline that, yet none of them received what had been promised. None of them ever got it here. But God had planned something better for us so that together with us they would be made perfect. Every individual the writer of Hebrews identifies in chapter 11 was a man who looked down the road, focused on what is unseen, focused on the promises, focused on what God was going to give them, denying themselves the gratification here for what is to come. So, do we focus on the seen or unseen, faith or sight? The life we have now and the life that's to come. God has promised us a new body. I want to take just a moment because Paul uses some imagery here that maybe we don't quite get. He says he uses a concept of naked and clothed. Let me just kind of help you out with that. When he talks about being naked, he is talking about death. When we die, we lose. Our soul is separated from any physical body. And so he says when we die, we become naked. And God has promised to clothe us. And so when Jesus comes back, we're going to be clothed in a new body. And it's interesting, he says, while we're here, we groan, we long, we're burdened. That means we're anticipating it, we're waiting for it. It seems like it's never going to come. You ever been there? Yeah, about anything? It seems like we're never going to get there on a trip. That's what are we there yet? How much further? How much longer? That's what it comes to in regards to the resurrection body we're going to get. It seems like it's never going to come. We long for it. And notice what Paul says, we don't desire to be unclothed. What does that tell you about Paul? I want Jesus to come back and give me my body before I die. I want Jesus to come back so I never have to experience that unclothing. But Paul's focus was on what? The resurrection. The new body, the new home. John 14, Jesus said, I'm going away to prepare a place for you. And when it's complete, I will return for you that it may be where I am. What are we focused on? Are we focused on the here and now or what's to come? Living by faith. Not wishful thinking, but absolute confidence. You read Hebrews 11:1, you'll find out what faith is. I'm just kind of giving you a little crumb here because after we're through with this series, we're going to launch into a brief series called Crazy Faith. We're going to talk more about what faith is and living by faith looks like. But then the last one he says is pleasing myself or pleasing God. Let's pick up the verse 8 or verse 9. So we make it our goal to please Him. Excuse me, whether we're at home in the body or away from it. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due him for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. It's a contrast in lifestyles. Life on the dot. What's the focus of living life on the dot? It's all about me. It's all about what I want. The focus is on me. I want to do what I want. I want to satisfy my desires the way I want. I want what I want. Tom, I got that book finally out of the library, Civility. And this guy is presenting a case that says civility. We've lost civility in our culture by a large extent because we have become so focused on us. Civility is the ability to deny myself for the benefit of another. Living to please myself doesn't care about you. It cares about me and what's in it for me, and I focus on striving after my goals, my desires, my longings, my wishes. I don't deny myself any. As we talked about last week, their God is their stomach, their physical desires. Deny themselves nothing. Living on the line, on the other hand, is seeking to please God. Seeking what will I do today that honors God. In this situation, in this relationship, and what's presented for me, what will bring God the greatest honor and glory? What will glorify Him? John 5:30, Jesus is our perfect example. He says, I live to do what the Father tells me to do. Every aspect of Jesus' life was focused on that. My food is to do the will of the Father who sent me. In the garden, we see Him coming face to face with the reality of death. And what does He say? Not my will, but your will be done. That's what pleasing the Father is. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, Paul says, in whatever you do, whether in word or in deed, do it to the glory of God. Living on the line is all about God's reputation. It's all about accomplishing what God has for us to do. Living on the dot is all about me. The important principle of this treasure principle is where we are focusing our efforts. We no longer live for the dot. But he says one other thing. In verse 10, he wraps it up. Why is that important? And it's not something we very popularly preach anymore. We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due him for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. That goes back to the story of the stewards in Matthew 25 we talked about, where the master entrusted riches to these men and they brought back and they had to give an account. Guys, every one of us will come to the throne on that day and we will have to give an account of our stewardship God has entrusted to us. And there are two words that are going to characterize the people who come to that place. There are going to be those who live for the dot, whose lives are going to be filled with regret. Anybody here know what regret is? Anybody ever went and bought something and come home and said, "What was I thinking? I wish I could go back and get rid of it now." Usually has to do with cars, I find. Why did I enslave myself to that payment? Why did I buy that piece of junk? Regret. Why did I treat so-and-so like that? Why did I do that thing? Regret is awful. And to think about, as you stand before God's throne of judgment, you're going to be caused to see every decision you have made. And you're going to be caused to ask, why did I do that instead of this? What a terrible place to be, looking back on all the wasted time and decisions and energy I expended when I could have pursued God. Or there will be those who will be accepting precious rewards. Those who have been faithful, those who have focused their life on the line, and let's know none of us do it perfectly. We live in the grace of God that forgives us and cleanses us. But for those who have focused on the line and have lived that eternal line out, they're going to come before the Father's throne, and they're going to hear those words that we all want to hear when He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into my rest." Regret or reward, that's the whole issue that boils down to here. Living for the dot fills you with regrets. Living for the line fills you with a promise of reward. To wrap this up, I want us to listen to how Francis Chan put this in an illustration he used. Do you want to run that video, Joel?
It's about the future. Paul's going, man, what am I to look forward to at the end? I'm going to bring an illustration this is like the first illustration I did. It was 20 years ago, but I can't think of a better way to explain it. I actually didn't use a rope back then. I used remember computer paper when it was all stuck together and it had the holes on the side that you had to peel off? Remember that? I remember getting a roll, and some of you guys have no idea what I'm talking about, which is crazy to me. But because that was the best, and it never worked right because of the rolling things. But I remember being a youth pastor, and I put that computer paper all the way around the room, and but I'm going to use a rope now because I can't find that computer paper. Imagine this rope. Okay, pretend this rope just goes on forever. Okay, just imagination. Pretend it goes around the world a few times. It doesn't. It ends at the rock. But let's just imagine this thing goes on forever. Now imagine that this rope is a timeline of your existence. You just exist forever. You see this red part? This would represent your time on earth. You've got a few short years here on earth, and then you've got all of eternity somewhere else. This is your existence. And what blows me away is some of you, all you think about is this red part. It's all you think about. You're consumed with this. You go, oh man, I can't wait till here. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to save so I can really enjoy this part right here. And you're consumed with that, and you're thinking, oh man, am I going to get to travel? Am I going to eat well? Am I going to do this during this part? And I'm like, are you kidding me? What about this? What about this? What about all this stuff? It's crazy to me because the Bible teaches that what I do during this little red part determines how I'm going to exist for millions and millions and millions of years forever. And so why would I spend this little red part trying to make myself as comfortable as possible, enjoying myself as much as I can? Paul says, look, I'm going to live my life for this mission. I'm going to spend my life, invest my life for this moment when I cross that finish line. See, I'm going to forget about all this stuff I could enjoy, and I'm not going to look around. I'm going to be like a runner, just looking at that moment when I face God, because when I face Him, then I don't get this chance over again. We get one chance at this life on earth, and it can end at any second for any of us. We've got one chance at this, and then comes eternity. And I'm not going to be fooled. I'm not going to spend my life down here. See, people look at some of my decisions and go, oh, you're so stupid because that's going to really affect this. I go, no, you're stupid because it's going to affect all of this. Man, I'm serious. I look at the way people live and I go, wow, that is so crazy. You are so crazy. You're going to do that right now, just to enjoy right now. Not even knowing if you have tomorrow, and you think that's smart and that I'm dumb? It doesn't make any sense. Paul goes, I'm not going to look around at all this stuff. And it's tempting. It's tempting to all of us. That's what I'm saying. Down here, it's crazy because everyone lives that way. Everyone lives for the red part. No one's thinking about the millions of years afterwards. It's just this crazy deception that we can't get out of our minds. And Paul goes, I'm not doing that. He goes, I keep my eyes on that. I keep my eyes on that finish line, and I'm going to forget what's behind me. I'm not looking around. I'm straining. He goes, I'm straining forward. I'm like stretching forward for that mark. I'm going to pass this thing. I'm going to live this out, and I'm going to face Him. I'm going to come before the judges, and He's going to hand me that trophy. He goes, I'm going to get it. And I haven't gotten there yet. He goes, but you better believe I'm using every muscle, exerting every bit about me, because I'm going to pass that line well.
That's the essence of what we're talking about. What are you living for? The little red part or the eternal part? And it's all our choice. And we cross over from that red part when we realize eternity stretches out before us by placing faith in Jesus Christ. Knowing that He has forgiven me and promised forgiveness and cleansing and wholeness if I will just simply submit my life to Him and give my life to obedience to Him. Today, maybe some are here who have been focused just on that little red line. And today want to realize that I got to quit living for that and live for eternity. Maybe some of us who have been Christians for a while have gotten sidetracked and we're living that way in our lives right now. Maybe we just need to begin expanding our vision and begin living for the line. Maybe somebody here who's never started a relationship with Jesus Christ is recognizing, man, I am wasting time, and there's going to come that day I'm going to stand before God and I'm going to be filled with regret, and I don't want that. And begin that life of reward by giving their life to Jesus. By acknowledging Him, by repenting, turning around and going back towards God, by confessing Him as my hope, my salvation, and by being obedient through baptism that I go there and I go in one person and come out an entirely new person, committed to living for Jesus. I don't know where you're at in that, but where are you on that line? Living for the dot, as he says, is crazy. Living for the line is the smartest thing you'll ever do. Let's pray together. Father, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to live for the line, Father. Because of Jesus, we know what that line leads to. We know it's reward. Father, without Jesus, we know that line goes somewhere that's unpleasant and terrible, Father. It's a separation from you. It's separation from everything good in life. Father, I just ask that today you would help us to understand where we are. Father, help us to question what we're living for. Father, if I think that I can't take it with me, but I can send it on ahead, it's certainly time to stop living on the dot. Lord, today, you know the decisions each of us need to make. You know we're all in that process someplace, and I just ask you would help us to have the boldness and courage to make those decisions. If there's someone here today who's never had a relationship with Jesus, never begun a relationship with Jesus, Lord, today would you help them to know that you're with them, that you're encouraging them, that you are here and will be faithful to all you've said. Lord, help us to live for the reward. Let us stretch ourselves and press forward to achieve that end. And Lord, now as we come to our time of communion, to realize and recognize the source of our hope, I ask that you would help us to embrace it, help us to celebrate it, help us to know that we're in this together, help us to be encouraged by one another, help us to encourage one another as we live our life towards eternity. Lord, thank you for your grace to us. Thank you for the forgiveness and life we have through Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
In the morning